Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this breakout room where we have Professor Herman and Dr. Johnson Low take us through a closer applied view of what it means to adopt a life cycle thinking approach to manufacturing. For you, the audience, this is your chance again to ask them questions directly by posting your questions in the chat forum, and we'll keep an eye out for them. Also, if you have any technical issues, please post a private message to our SingX help team. So I'm turning to you now, Professor Herman. We did mention life cycle thinking, but very briefly in passing during the plenary session. So can you set the context for us here by telling us more about it, how it came about, and how has it been applied so far?
Yeah, James, thank you. It will be my pleasure to just give a short summary what does life cycle thinking means. So life cycle means that we think from the beginning to the end, which means from the cradle to grave or from the mining to the recycling. So what we do is we take a picture similar what we see in nature, right? Where things grow and after some time it comes to a saturation and then maybe it dies. And if you take this to technical systems, we can also think about starting from raw material to the part manufacturing, to assembly, the final product, the distribution, the use of the product, a take back of the product, disassembly and recycling. And thinking in this perspective, this is what we call life cycle thinking. So why is life cycle thinking a key? A key is because at all these different steps, we have cost and also impacts to the environment as we use energy and resources. So as soon as we miss this total perspective of the life cycle, we always run in a so-called danger to have so-called trade-offs or problem shifting. So that means we have a good intention of maybe doing a production process better, choosing a different material, but suddenly we cause a new environmental problem somewhere else in the mining or in the end of life in recycling. And
external
to avoid
costs,
this,
essentially.
So just to avoid this, we go to life cycle thinking.
Okay. So, well, as a layman, right, when I hear the term life cycle, it seems to suggest a very, I don't know, a very long view of things. It's holistic and very, I don't know, generous in a sense. You know, the perspective you have to think of, like you said, from cradle to grave, and how things begin and the end of it. It seems also, I don't know, from my perspective, it also assumes that certain things remain stable and predictable, that business processes and practices will evolve in practical or predictable ways, such that you can actually predict the life cycle of this thing. Is it always the case? Is it true?
I'm not sure if I understood right, but I think what you said is it sounds very complex. It sounds a little bit theoretical. It's you know, very
realistic, you know.
Yeah. So, and I totally understand, right? If you are an SME and you want to produce your product, and suddenly there's a professor coming and say you have to think from the mining to the recycling. How should I do this? You know. And this is really the challenge. I can fully understand. However, in the last decades, we tried to minimize this complexity, to make it more handleable. But today we have to realize that without this big picture, as you call it, or holistic, we will run in the wrong direction. And as a business, you miss opportunities because a lot of your costs are related to the life cycle. Because most of the cost as a manufacturer you have is not the cost you have in your gate-to-gate business, in your factory. That is the cost of the material purchase, the cost of maybe product that come back due to warranty aspects. So the life cycle perspective is something that brings you also into new business areas, and avoiding just thinking about building a product and selling it, but maybe taking care about the product, about the different stages. But yes, it comes with a new additional complexity. And that's why we need to deliver method tools that make it companies more easier to handle this.
Any comments, Johnson? I'm just wondering, like,
Yes,
I'm sure
Jane.
you both work together. You, of course, agree with Professor Herman, right?
No,
Yeah,
we are not
yeah. So,
always agreeing.
yeah, Professor Herman is actually my mentor, right? So how can I disagree with him?
No. He's joking.
Yeah, I just want to add another layer of perspective to what Professor Herman has just explained. I think trying to simplify this concept of life cycle thinking, I don't think it's as complex as people make it up to be. And yeah, I fully agree with Professor Herman when he says that when you meet SME, immediately, like once I had this answer, oh, life cycle thinking, why life cycle engineering? What is that? Something to do with life sciences? It's quite common, right? But it's very heartening to see that it is becoming more of a mainstream topic. So maybe when I simplify an example, just look at our humble plastic bag. The life cycle of a plastic bag is relatively short, right? It's not that complex. You use plastic materials, you produce it at your factory, and they are mass produced, right? And then it's so fast, right? The turnaround is so fast that you distribute it to the retailers, and then the consumer buy their groceries, for example, they put it in their bags, and then they bring it home. And then if you're in Singapore, the question mark is, okay, what do you do with the plastic bag? Likely, what we do is we bag our trash, and then we throw it down our chutes, right? So that is the whole life cycle of plastic bag, actually. It's not that complex. Now, I want to go to the topic about problem shifting. So using the same plastic bag example, so people talk about banning plastic bags. Again, here, the evil is not the plastic bag, but really the evil is about overconsumption of plastic bags. Now, if you ban plastic bags here in Singapore, do we have an alternative to bag our trash? So if we do that, we are actually shifting the problem to somebody else, and probably NEA. Likely it's going to be NEA is going to deal with that problem, and it becomes a hygiene problem. So this is one very relatable example of how problem shifting can happen.
Okay.
But Jane, if you allow me to jump in, right?
Sure.
And this is now the starting point where innovation starts, right? You recognize that the problem is not so easily be solved by just banning something. And now companies have to jump in and say, okay, but what is the disruptive solution for that? Do we need bags? Can we do it completely different? Is there a concept to guarantee hygiene product without any plastic bags? So, the life cycle thinking is also helping you to ask maybe the right questions, and then, come up with innovative concepts to address the challenge.
And also bring it within the ambit of what businesses consider to be their problem. They cannot outsource it. It's like pollution, right?
Yes.
Back in the day, like it was the tragedy of the commons. Remember when the people kind of say, "Oh, it's not my problem," but now there are rules and regulations that make it actually the responsibility of businesses to care about that. So I guess this is where regulations need to catch up and be applied more creatively in ways that make sense to businesses without killing them, of course, right?
Definitely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, of course, regulations has to be there. Otherwise, maybe nobody will react. But the reaction of manufacturers should not be and say, oh, there's too much regulation, it's overregulated, and so on. The first question has to be, and of course, this is always a delicate thing, right? Because if a manufacturer comes and fulfills the regulation, then the regulator says, oh, great. Oh, it's so easy for them to fulfill. Let's come up with the next regulation. So this is a game. But again, what is driving innovations? If you look into the last centuries, so when the humankind was inventive or came up with new solution, was always in crisis, in times where resources were scarce, human resources, material resources, and so on. And if you take that, let's say, as an input in your company, and not say, okay, we have to do lobbying and avoid it and so on. It might be a chance.
Yeah, and I just want to further add to what Professor has mentioned. Just looking at the current crisis, look at so many of the examples of the innovation that has been accelerated due to the necessity of dealing with the crisis. Look at like our local mass production, right? Suddenly our supply chain got disrupted because everyone needed to stockpile their own mass for their own use. And Singapore just rallied, around this problem and just innovated. What usually took like a year or 2 years became 3 to 6 months. So these are very, very good examples, especially during this time.
Yeah, and there's a question actually from well, not a question, but more a comment on from John Lee again about how some consumer appliance companies are required. I don't know whether it's a requirement, but they have an option of buying back their own products, at least at some percentage. I think that's that could be a way to go, but I don't know how widespread that could be. Like say, for example, e-waste, as one of the other speakers is in that sector. So I don't know whether what your thoughts are on this. How prevalent can this be? Is this going to be enough? All these measures for buying back of goods and things like this.
If I can start with an answer and try, and maybe Jonathan can add on it. I think there are not sustainability-related jobs and non-sustainability-related jobs. All jobs are related to sustainability. So, we have to re-understand what sustainability means. Sustainability doesn't mean business versus environment. Sustainability means there's one planet that has an Earth-like support system. And this planet is limited with regard of the resources and with regard to the biocapacity the planet can provide to us. Inside this, we have the society, and inside this, we have businesses. So everybody of us, in daily doing and how we drive, how we eat, what we produce, the job we do, we have always an environmental impact. So, and there is no one that can say, okay, no, I have nothing to do with sustainability. And we, of course, if you take unemployment, the question is, for example, if you have big challenges and the crisis is giving us a chance, what I've mentioned in the webinar, we can, of course, think about where we can create new jobs in terms of better waste management system, transition of our energy system, and so on. But it is not the question of being not sustainable person or being a sustainable person.
Okay. So maybe I can draw the conversation back to this whole space of industry, right? I understand that Fraunhofer has this life cycle framework, if I may call it that is applied more in terms of like for industries and enterprises. Do you see this better suited to certain industries and manufacturing enterprises, or is it for everybody?
I think it's for everybody. You can use it, of course, for a car manufacturer with a complex product. Think about what's happening at the moment to the car industry. Big transition. We go to electric vehicles. We see complete new vehicle concept. We even see new companies popping up in China, in US with Tesla, and so on. But you can also go down. I always use a very nice example I have seen in Australia, in Sydney. There's a company, they produce eyewear. And they produce the eyewear in the shop. And they produce it out of plastic, and they produce it out of waste plastic. So the customer can go in the shop, bring some plastic waste, for example, caps from milk bottles, and I say, I want a new sunglass. And then they shredded the material in the shop, they produce in front of you your new eyewear frame, cut the glasses, and then you get your eyewear. And this is a complete new business. This is a small company, or they started as a small company, it's just an eyewear seller. But it's a life cycle perspective, because what they do is they involve the customer in making the product, so the product becomes individual or personalized. So the binding between the customer and the product and the factory is much more larger, right? And so this is also a concept. And again, it is the car on the one side and the eyewear on the other side in SME. So it's not an exclusive concept for large companies.
Okay, so it spans industrial products as well as consumer type things. I'm just thinking, but when you're saying about the example of the eyewear company, to what extent this model, I don't know, to my ears, it sounds a bit gimmicky, but it's very attractive. But I'm just thinking to make it viable for in terms of benefit for the industry, it has to scale in some way and maybe extend to other kinds of consumer goods. Yeah, so maybe somebody will take it up, you know. Could you actually share with us a bit more about what are the key elements of this life cycle framework to maybe give a bit more concrete examples of how it applies at different stages of, say, manufacturing, for example?
Yeah. So one key element of the concept is that you understand the different energy, material, and information flows related to your product and activities along this life cycle.
Okay.
So this is a key element. And as soon as you have understand, okay, where are the material flows? So this means, okay, maybe I have I use aluminum and I understand how much waste is created at my supplier side or what happens with my product after it was used. I suddenly can ask new questions. For example, I can ask the question, okay, can I maybe make an offer to my customer to give the product back to me because I can maybe repair or remanufacture it and then I can get additional value out of it, or I make sure that my product can be recycled and then get a benefit of it. So I can ask starting the questions, and there are two key concepts. One is on the cost side, which is life cycle costing. So there are methods and tools that allow you to calculate precisely the cost related to the life cycle. And there on the other one, there is what is called life cycle assessment. This is the English word for doing the environmental life cycle assessment. And this is also an ISO standard. Where you can quantitatively describe the impact of your product to the environment. Of course, it comes with some efforts in preparing that data. However, data is getting better and better available. But as soon as you have that picture and you understand, you can again ask the question. You can ask, oh, why I use a material coming from that country causing so huge environmental impact? Is there an alternative? I saw the question, can I go to biodegradable plastic instead of using conventional plastic? Can I use a natural fiber from Malaysia maybe to integrate it into my product? So again, it offers you a new opportunity to ask questions and to come out of your box. These are two key methods and tools.
Okay. So this perfectly answers a question that came in from Sam Yong Kim. He says, how can we assess life cycle of products or systems consistently in order to compare which is more sustainable, right? So would you say that this life cycle framework or assessment model, is it universal or is it, how is it?
Yeah, I mean, the framework itself is universal, and also the methodology of life cycle assessment, which is standardized by ISO 40040.
Okay.
However, if you come then down to a specific industry, you need specific data. And of course, as you are an SME, you might need experts like Dr. Lowe supporting you to handle the data, because this is you need experience. It's similar to if you want a detailed cost calculation, maybe you go to somebody from the finance and not doing everything by yourself. But the framework is generic. And it's used in chemical industry. It is even used for very much in food industry, agricultural products, waste management. So, and it can help you also to make decisions and say, okay, if material A is better than B, what does it mean for my business? It also helps you to communicate the results maybe to the government or to your customer.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to turn now to Jonathan, because give Prof. Herman a break. He's been talking a lot. So maybe Jonathan, you can you can contextualize what Prof. Herman has just said in Asia's context. In terms of like how these assessment models, how are they applied in industry? Is there a good traction? And is the government also taking this on board in terms of like reporting requirements and so forth?
Okay, so actually in the recent years, we have seen a very strong push for the adoption of life cycle assessment, especially. Mm. So again, like life cycle engineering, this topic of life cycle assessment is becoming very, very mainstream in Singapore. In fact, when we work with our sister government agencies, they are also looking at life cycle assessment, right, to help support or inform some of their decisions or policy making. And when we meet companies, there are still some companies that haven't heard about this. So to contextualize this, I always like to use the analogy of seeing a doctor. So this life cycle assessment is just like a doctor's tool, but in this case, we are not assessing your health, but rather the environmental health of your company, right? So this particular life cycle assessment is just like a diagnostic tool that tells you, hey, how healthy are you in terms of not harming the environment, right? And like the famous adage, right? You cannot improve what you don't measure. Mm. So this is exactly that tool to help you to measure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to what Professor Herman mentioned about the ISO standards, the standards are out there and it's accessible for the industry to adopt.
Do you see this being more, having more traction in certain industries or not? I don't know. Do you see more some certain sectors of industry more receptive to this? That's my question actually.
Right. So I think we are aware that recently Singapore introduced the carbon tax, right? Mm. Yeah. So I think this is going to hit hard on the energy and chemical cluster. Mm-hmm. So companies in energy and chemicals, they are really pressured by that, and so I think this life cycle assessment has been in their lingo, in their dictionary for the longest time. Mm-hmm. It's just that now suddenly with the regulations, then they're starting to pay more attention because essentially this is a tool that provides the evidence for whether you are sustainable or you are not.
Okay. And this push, as far as you know, there has been no let up, right? I mean, this pandemic has not reduced the urge to carry on with implementing this whole carbon tax initiative. I'm just checking because I hear a lot of companies in deep trouble. So I don't know whether they're going to be cut some slack in terms of like keeping up with the schedule for adherence.
Yeah. Yeah. So somehow I expected this question, right? Such a popular question. Yeah. So I think not many people know that when we do sustainability, when we do research in life cycle engineering, sustainability is just one side of a two-sided coin, right? The other side of the coin is actually about resilience. Mm. So now we are looking at the current crisis, people thinking about supply chain resilience, especially like food. We are importing more than 90% of our food, how our food system, our local food system is being disrupted. Every time our Prime Minister has an announcement, all our supermarkets are cleared. The shelves are all cleared, right? So it gives you like an impression, right? There's some fear, right, among the people that, we don't have this essential resources so that we can survive. And then people start paying a lot of attention on supply chain resilience, right? And then even the mask situation has highlighted the need for that. But when we look at sustainability, actually there are two sides of the same coin. Why? Because when we apply life cycle thinking, we are looking like what Professor Herman has mentioned earlier. We are looking at all the resource flows that goes into our production of our goods, our services, and what are the pollution or the waste that we are producing throughout the whole life cycle. That actually gives us a picture of how dependent we are on resources. And when we reduce the dependence on resources, we become more resilient.
So this, in a way, also goes back to what we said earlier on in plenary about this overall education and awareness, right? Like it or not, this whole situation with the pandemic is forcing us our attention on these elements that we really need to pay attention to, for whether we like it, like I said, like it or not. Some are dragged kicking and screaming because of the regulations that will kick in. Others, maybe, they may not immediately change their behaviors overnight, but at least they're a little more aware now, right? Yeah. So I guess I want to come to our last question, because we are coming up to time. My question is, again, it's a matter of the mindset. I keep going back to this thing about mindsets. Like you were saying, Jonathan, earlier, businesses, especially among if I may be stereotyping them wrongly, but I get the sense that many SMEs, their concerns are still very pegged to dollars and cents, revenue, outcome measures. I don't see, or at least I'm not aware of, that their perspectives changing very much in terms of like increasingly looking at sustainability. I guess my point is, how can we make it such that this whole concern with sustainability become a natural course of doing business? Course, not cost, course of doing business, to change behaviors, so that they don't see it as, oh gosh, another thing to worry about. But it's just something, it's automatically, yeah, it makes perfect business sense for me to do that. I don't know how this can be aligned to business values as far as the SME is concerned.
Okay, maybe I go first and then I'll pass to Professor Herman.
Okay.
So yeah, you're actually putting me in a spot, because this is a tough question. If I'm able to answer this question, right, I think all the problems will be solved. So really, I think, yes, it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. But how? Unfortunately, we are all still trying to figure it out. I think there's no silver bullet or one side dependent. But I think here I was through the Q&A, there was a question about the Maslow hierarchy, the sustainability state. I think I'm not a social scientist, and I don't want to claim to be one, right? But really, I think that is quite I would say, a pertinent question. Priorities are firefighting. They just want to survive. And when you have that kind of mentality, right? Because if I'm not wrong, the Maslow hierarchy, the top is something like self-actualization and something like that, right? Left, you are more selfless, right?
Right.
I don't think during this crisis is going to help.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to survive. I think this is the challenge that we are currently facing right now. But however, they need to look at the current crisis, right? Actually, I don't want to paint a very dystopian future, but I think this is just a preview of what is about to come if we don't do something right now. Because if we don't limit our global warming, the temperature rise, we are not going to able.
We won't be here doing webinars anymore for much longer.
Precisely, because we probably don't have the resources to produce the energy to run our devices.
Exactly. Yeah. So last 30 seconds, Prof. Herman.
Maybe I would like to include the question from Summer, the difference between developing and underdeveloped or emerging countries. I mean, we have to understand that the sustainability challenges we have are global challenges. It's not about Singapore, it's not about Germany to rescue the world. It's really a global challenge. And that is definitely now a problem we have, because the money which is now invested, which is maybe not just invested to rescue companies, which I can understand, this money is spent now, and we can spend money only once. And the question is, of course, also that we need a global alliance with countries like India or others, Africa, to help all move into this transition. And of course, the some of the countries should avoid to make the same mistake we have already done in the past with creating problems like plastic waste and so on. So my last 3 minutes would be, or 3 seconds would be Global Alliance.
Okay. So on that note, thank you for being with us today and for answering questions so gamely, and for not falling off your chair, Jonathan, for me putting you in the tough spot. Okay. So the audience,
Thanks for having us.
yeah, thank you for joining us as well. So let us know what you think by completing the poll that should again pop up in front of you. Okay. You may have questions that you were either too shy to ask or you were still thinking about it, but don't worry, you can still carry on and post them at the Interchange community platform that I mentioned earlier. That should be a link for you to join in the chat forum. Right. So we will, let's see. Okay. So yeah, please give us a feedback on the poll or on the webinar today, and also give us any ideas of future topics that you'd like to hear. Right. And the recording of today's webinar will be on ITAP Academy. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed today's session. We look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Thank you.